Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. This is great. Okay, well, this is Jeff Klausner, professor of medicine and public health at UCLA, and I am the coordinator of the GloCal career development tracks. I want to thank everyone for joining us this morning for our March presentation and discussion. Very happy to have with us today Dr. Brandon Brown from University of California, Riverside. Dr. Brown earned his PhD in international health and epidemiology at the Johns Hopkins University in 2010. I've been working Dr. Brown over the past 10 years in a variety of different projects related to STD, HPV, HIV, immunology, and clinical research. We invited Dr. Brown back this year because he gives a very popular talk and leads a great discussion about some very practical aspects of career development at the critical point between as people finish up their postdoctoral training and embark on their path toward academic success. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Brown, and unfortunately I have another meeting now, so I'm going to have to sign off him, but I'm going to leave you in his capable hands. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Klausner. Yeah, let's get started. This talk kind of follows a conversation I had back in 2016 with some colleagues who were kind of surprised as to how I was able to navigate the system in terms of negotiating and advocating for myself and my salary. And giving this talk in part because I made a lot of mistakes, and hopefully you can avoid some of the mistakes that I've made after this talk. So since this is a webinar, I probably won't do the slide right here that you can see in front of you, but I'll just say something briefly that those of you who might be postdocs looking to transition, this talk will be a lot about kind of focusing on the tenure track position, but there's definitely going to be some ideas for you as well, and we could talk at the end. But kind of very briefly, what I would say that you need for a well-paying entry-level academic job are a grant, and you have one with GloCal. Some teaching experience, even if you have one lecture, kind of get your evaluations, for instance, give a webinar and get eval, and then publications. And if you don't have too many publications, you could start out with something like a letter to the editor or a commentary, and we could talk about that if you would like. So you can imagine submitting a job application and you receive the offer letter here that you can see on your screen. And it says, congratulations, we're pleased to offer you a faculty appointment at the university of your dreams. We have a targeted start date for August 2019, and your starting salary is $70,000. And, you know, this seems awesome. This is your dream university. You have an offer. Can anyone who's on the webinar let me know what might be missing from this offer letter? And if you're there, you can just blurt it out if you like.
Hey, this is June. I'm a veterinarian doing work here in Tanzania. So what I see here, or what I don't see, are the conditions of your contract in terms of benefits like health insurance, say paid vacation time, your responsibilities and what's expected of you if you have to take on other tasks. There's other things that I can't think of, it's at the tip of my tongue, but those are the ones that speak out at me right now.
Yeah, those are great. Um, so, I mean, you hit a lot of the important ones. So, cool, you have this salary that's $70,000, but what else comes with that? Do you get health insurance? Do you get, vision and dental? Do you have vacation time that you accrue in this position, or do you have to just kind of work until you die or retire? And then what are the responsibilities and expectations? So that's probably the most important one that you hit on. And I think we can kind of break that up into different things. We could break that up into the teaching, research, and service. And depending on the type of position, the breakdown of those three areas, research, teaching, and service, might be different percentages. Because in certain positions, you might have 100% of your salary is generated by you, so that might mean that 100% of your efforts need to go towards that research. And then in other positions, it might be that you're going to be paid by the university to teach. So your teaching might be 50%, your research might be 40%, and your service might be 10%. And just as an aside, the one of those three items, research, teaching, and service, that is kind of valued the least, although I feel it's significantly more important, is the service aspect. And we could talk about that more at the end. So before you negotiate, probably should know these three things. One is the type of faculty positions. One is how you're paid, and then even if you need to be actually paying yourself. So here's a quick slide on the different types of faculty positions. There's the trainee series, the professor series, and then there's some other possibilities. So usually the most common ones that we want to try and target are the professor series. This would be, for example, assistant professor with state funds, or assistant professor in residence, which is not state funds. So that would require you to have more funds from your own research. But there's a lot of other possibilities. There's lecturers, which are kind of funded totally by teaching. There's the professional research series, which is no teaching and all research. And then there's also adjunct professor series. And the assistant professor state funded positions, for example, they could cover 9 months or 12 months, depending on your contract. And in residence usually means that at some point you might have to make up 100% of salary from your grants, unless you get some support from the school for teaching or something else like leadership activities, chairing committees, or even chairing the department. So looking at the professor series briefly, so what you want, or what most people want in this particular environment where getting NIH grants is not as easy as it once was, is to have a guaranteed salary through state funds. Now, this does mean that you'll have an expectation of teaching, since the state is actually paying for part of your salary. But I think that's okay, because having that guarantee actually provides a peace of mind. For the non-state funds, usually startup packages kind of guarantee salary for just a certain period of time. And it really depends on the university, because my former mentor, Hopkins, for example, he was responsible for 90% of his salary, bringing in 90% with grants. And then there's, for schools of medicine, for example, you could also negotiate some amount above a salary that's guaranteed for a certain time period. So, for example, when I first started here at UCLA, my salary was guaranteed for 4 years. And then after those 4 years pass, it means that I now have to kind of worry a bit more about my research funding to tame to myself and to increase my salary. So we can go over some of this again. So just keep your questions in mind. I'll make sure to try and get through this fast. So first thing early on, usually your base salary You want it to be high because in academia is kind of a slowly moving ship. So, for example, the low salary at UC Irvine is 51,000 as a starting assistant professor, and nobody wants that. When you go through all the trials and tribulations to get your PhD, you don't want to start at $51,000 because you could make $51,000 doing a lot of things that don't require a PhD. To give you a sense, I started at 60,000 in my first position, which was also very low. But when I go over my personal story, I'll kind of tell you more about that. And salaries within schools or departments do not have to be equitable. So they don't have to be equal. If you're the same at the same level, the same title, the same step, for example, you don't have to be at the same salary. So it's all a negotiation. And as long as it's in a reasonable range, everything is fine. And you only get more if you ask for more. For example, if you come into a position that you are kind of invited to and you get an offer letter, if you come in with lots of publications and lots of independent research funding, you could likely negotiate for more. And you can negotiate for other things in addition to what we talked about with that offer letter that we saw on the screen a few slides ago. You can ask for moving expenses. You can ask for startup funds. It's not out of the question to ask for $100,000 as a startup to kind of jumpstart your research career. You can ask for a signing bonus. You can ask for a course teaching release for the first year. And then, of course, you can ask for a guarantee of salary for a number of years as you get your career going. And I want to show you just quickly an example from the UC system. And these are the base academic salaries. And you can see that it looks a bit low. It's not as low as what I said before because they've gone up over time. But for example, if you look at assistant professor step 3, it's $70,200 for a 9-month position. And then in this next slide, this is a 12-month position. You can see the salary went up a little bit to 81,000. And here, this is actually the medical school salary. So why the jump? We saw the assistant professor step 3 go from 81,000 to 114,000. And one of the reasons is because many medical schools offer more salaries to medical school faculty because they're expected to bring in more funds from grants. And there's also a calculation that goes along with this. So usually you negotiate your salary annually, you have your base, you have your extra salary paid above the base, which happens a lot in medical schools and professional schools like engineering. You have a negotiated part that you can actually negotiate with your chair or your dean. And then if you happen to be a clinician, you can also generate a salary from your clinical duties. All of this kind of factors into what they call a total negotiated salary. That's the TNS. And UCSF, for example, they would expect you to get much more grant funding from research compared to other UCs. So that would factor into your negotiated salary there. Another way that you can kind of think about negotiating salary is to use data. So individual salary information on public school campuses is available online. And I'll provide a link at the end of the presentation where you could look this up. And there's a big range of differences between institutions. And you can compare your institution, if you happen to be at a public school, with other national averages. And you can compare your salary with your peers, and you could make actually a data-driven justification of why you want a higher salary. Using data is always good because we can argue all day that we believe we deserve a higher salary, but if we actually have the data to back it up and some reference other faculty that are similar to you, bringing grants similar to you and at the same level, this could actually help you in the negotiation process. You can see here that there's big differences in the different steps of a faculty member. So starting as an instructor, it looks pretty low. Assistant professor a bit higher, and it just keeps going up over time. And the link is at the end for this. And all state worker salaries, at least in California, are public, so you can look up people at the school you're applying to see what the average pay is. And this is from the Sacramento Bee. And here's a list of California schools, just to show you the range and the differences between schools as part of the UC system. So I'm at Riverside. You can see Riverside, it's kind of near to the bottom of the list. UCLA seems to be at the top. Now, another tool you can use for salary negotiation is to get offer letters. And offer letters, what they do is they really tell you your academic worth. And usually you only apply to schools that you're actually someone interested in. Not only to not waste their time, but if they're a solid no. So if you happen to be at a university right now and they tell you, okay, we're not gonna give you a raise, but if you go out and get an offer letter, we'll consider it. And this definitely is something that's becoming more and more the norm. But if you happen to apply to schools that you have no interest in, it's kind of wasting their time. So really, if you have to go through this process, just apply to schools that you might have some interest in. And perks of getting these outside offer letters might be the guaranteed funding for additional years, salary coverage from an existing grant, and maybe you could find out that the situation at your school is really horrible, or you could find out that the situation in your school is great because these other schools, they really don't seem to be as good as yours. And the worst case that could happen is that your current school that you're at, you bring your offer letter, and they say, well, we can't match this. Congratulations on getting this offer. And then go ahead and take it. We urge you to go and take that offer. So that's the kind of worst case scenario. So you have to be ready for that if you're going to go through this process of getting an outside offer letter. And then when all else fails, if that doesn't work, you could also go and talk with the provost, the ombudsman, the academic senate. You could ask someone else that has some power if they can actually assist you in negotiating your salary. And you could bring up all the things that we talked about here. You could bring up the data. You could bring up the offer letter. You could bring up, where you started, if you started at quite a low salary level. So I wanted to give you an example of my academic story, because this is what was interesting to people back in 2016 when I explained to them what happened to me. So I got a BS in applied mathematics. I worked in the HIV field in Singapore and South Africa during that time, trying to make myself more marketable. I actually went on to the MPH because the Master of Public Health and Epidemiology matched with my quantitative skills. As soon as I was kind of done with my first year of the MPH, I noticed that the economy at the time wasn't great. There weren't a lot of high-paying positions for people with an MPH, so I decided to stay in school. I went to Hopkins, got a degree in public health, and did work in Peru for about 8 years. And before I finished my dissertation, I looked for jobs in academia, and then I settled on a postdoc in global health. It was kind of set up to start the postdoc a day after my graduation, so there was no break in time and also in my salary. And postdocs through the NIH, they don't pay a whole lot. So back at that time, it was $38,000 per year. But I also did a concurrent postdoc at UCSD. So I did a postdoc at UCLA and UCSD. The one at UCLA was with non-federal funds. So combining these two postdoc salaries, I was able to get a higher salary and start out at about $73,000, which was okay. And then During my postdoc, I applied for academic jobs. UC Irvine was kind of close to where I was living at the time, and they offered me 60,000. Now, this was less than what I would have as a postdoc. And the argument that they gave me was, well, you know, your postdoc is for 12 months. This job is for 9 months. And we promise you that in a year, we're going to increase your salary. So I believed them. I did this handshake deal, and I started the position at UC Irvine. Now, remember, there was nothing written about, we guarantee we're going to increase your salary in a year. There's nothing written about this. Was just kind of a gentleman's agreement, as they say, and I believe them. So I went to Irvine. I had kind of a high administrative load. I was the undergraduate director of the public health program. I led the honors program and the global health program. And I was teaching a whole lot. I taught about 8 courses per year. So this didn't leave me a lot of time to do anything else, including research. So I began to kind of get burnt out, and I asked for a raise because I said, you know, I'm doing all this work. I'm doing it for $60,000 a year. I need to do something because I'm getting burnt out and I'm not making enough money. And what they told me is, go get an offer and then we could talk. We're not going to give you a raise, but if you go and get an offer letter and bring it back, you know, we could discuss. So I did that. Very stressful to go out and get offer letters and interview at schools as you're teaching and research. So I applied and I got 3 offers from other schools. The highest one was $90,000 for 9 months. And this was a good raise from $60,000. And I brought this back to Irvine, and they matched it. They said, okay, you know, we see your value. Other schools value you. We see your value. Things will change. Come on back. We're going to make sure you don't burn out. But, you know, and things didn't change. And this was back in 2014. There was no additional resources. Things didn't change. And then there was an opening at UC Riverside School of Medicine, and they had an offer for me after I applied of $110,000. I had a training grant, and I had some money coming soon, so I was able to actually talk them up to $125,000. With $100,000 in discretionary funds to kind of jumpstart my research career, graduate research assistants, paid for conferences and supplies. So in the period of 2013 to 2014, I was actually able to double my salary from $60,000 to $125,000. And of course, over time, salaries go up, and you can look up anyone's salary, including mine, on in one of the links at the end of the slide, since all state salaries are public. So, quick reflections. Make sure you get everything in writing. And some of these things I learned by mistake. So if it's not in writing, it doesn't matter. And I got burned on my first job with a verbal promise that kind of never happened. Talk about interviewing, taking a lot of time. But grants make a huge difference, or they at least did for me when I was doing the negotiation process. So keeping leadership informed as well can help at times, because they're going to remember you. You know, publish a paper, send it to the media team, get a grant, make sure your dean knows. And when this happens, you're in their mind. So when you talk about wanting to negotiate your salary, you're already kind of in their brain as someone who's doing really good things, and they're not going to want to lose you. Pay lines for NIH are getting lower, and you're competing with people in the field who've been there for 30 to 40 years. So you can also consider non-traditional funding like PCORI or CDC or pharma funding. And service can definitely take you out, because it's easy to say yes to things, to be on this committee or that committee. But we also have to remember and think about over time as we develop the ability to say no. And the more service you do, the less time you have for papers, grants, or other research. And as I mentioned before, service probably matters the least in a tenure application. So focus on the service that you love and excel on it at it, and make sure it gets counted. And oftentimes mentoring does not count as much, but it's something that, we get asked to do more. And there's some references about that at the slides. And schools of medicine usually do pay more, but this has a cost, because at schools of medicine you often have to drive part of your salary. So here's some of the references I mentioned. I just think these slides are going to be made available after the talk. So I'm about my 20-minute mark that they asked me to be at. So I'll open it up now for questions. And I'll also say, if anyone would like to see an example of an offer letter, let me know, or let Pal know, and I can share it with her, and she could send it to everyone. So I'll open it up for questions or conversation.
Hi, Brandon. This is June again.
Hi, Jane.
I really appreciate the talk that you gave, because it's just not something they typically discuss in courses as you're preparing for the real world. So I guess I feel like it's always awkward to have to bring up to your boss about negotiation. So I guess, do you typically bring that up in an email, or just go in person asking, I would like to discuss my current salary? I just don't know what the etiquette is with regards to that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's not something that is easy, and it's not something that for example, if many of us have something that they call imposter syndrome, and if we have this imposter syndrome and not really feeling that we belong in academia at all, it actually makes it even more difficult to ask for more. So if I don't even belong here, how am I going to ask for something more than I already have? So, that does make it really difficult. In a lot of the UCs, at least in the schools of medicine, one thing that they have is an annual salary negotiation meeting with the faculty individually and their chair or their dean. So this actually makes it easy, because I don't have to be the one to actually bring it up, because it's something that they're bringing up. And the reason that they do it is to make sure that we're moving forward in grants and things like that to bring in money. Now, if this process isn't there, it's a different situation. If it happens to be a UC and it's not in the School of Medicine, a lot of the UCs now have this negotiated salary program where you can actually, it's a process, and you actually apply and do things on paper, and then eventually meet with your chair. So this is an option that most chairs and deans actually know about in the UC system. But outside of the system, I would say that the best way to approach it would be to not address it directly in the email, but to make it part of a mentor meeting. So if you happen to meet or set up a meeting with your chair, you can say, I'd like to set up a mentor meeting with you and kind of fill you in on, all the wonderful things that I'm doing right now. I have this grant, I have these publications, I'm involved in this project, to kind of raise the profile of the school or department. And then as part of that meeting, I would actually bring it up in that meeting. And you could even put it in the agenda as one of the things that you'd like to talk about. It's not an easy conversation, for sure. When I was at Irvine and I brought it up, it definitely was not an easy conversation. And as a result, I think the chair kind of wasn't ready for that conversation, which is why he said go out and get an offer letter. But if you also make the argument that you're dedicated to the school, to the department, you're doing all these great things, what you would like is you would like to be appropriately compensated. And even before you go to your departmental chair or your dean, you can also kind of do what I mentioned in the slides before, is get the data, get some comparative faculty that if you think that you're making less salary than you should, make sure you have some data with you to kind of make that data-driven argument to move forward. It doesn't mean that you have to be at the bottom of the barrel in terms of salary to have that discussion. Definitely not. But you can imagine that if I go to my chair and I have no grants and other people have grants and that they have a higher salary than me, my chair might say, well, they have a higher salary because they're getting more grants. But if I have a grant and bringing in some percent effort, then it's definitely appropriate to have that conversation, because you're bringing in money and prestige to your department. So it definitely will be uncomfortable, but it's necessary because most people don't do it, which is why they end up with the lower salary. I don't know if that helps, June.
That was really helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, Dr. Brown. We have a question from Vincent.
Sure.
He asked, how did you maintain while navigating burnout, low income, and possibly feeling undervalued after you got the offer letters, but subsequently didn't receive a raise? Did you speak with any of your bosses about your thoughts and feelings? Sorry, the desired, lower than desired income.
Okay, so is this like previous to going to my chair and asking about getting an increase, or is this like right when I joined Irvine from the postdoc?
I'm gonna just wait for Vincent to type.
Oh, okay.
He said both.
Yeah, maybe can you repeat the question? Okay. Can you repeat what you said before, Paul?
Sure. Said, how did you maintain while navigating burnout, getting a lower than desired income, and possibly feeling undervalued after you got the offer letters, but subsequently didn't receive a raise? Did you speak with any of your bosses about your thoughts, feelings?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, yeah, the burnout was definitely real because, and probably a lot of people on this call face the same thing. So for me, I think I mentioned I was, my course load was 8 courses. I had to be in charge of the undergraduate program and leading the honors program and leading this global health initiative. So it kind of became my life, and people, my family was like, hey, what's going on? We haven't seen you for a while. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm trying really hard. Oh, you must be making good money. Well, now I'm making $60,000, and then other people could be, oh yeah, I'm making $60,000, and I work over, at FedEx. Okay, something's up here. I got my PhD for a reason, to not only make a difference, but also to make an individual difference in myself and bring up the profile of of my own family, and kind of make sure that I'm able to succeed and thrive and survive. So in terms of feeling undervalued after getting some of the other offer letters, so what happened with me is that I got the offer letter from Irvine, and it was for 60,000. And what the chair had said is that, sure, you're making 73,000 for 12 months, but if you kind of divide that into 9 months, this is what we're going to pay you. And I didn't at that time feel totally undervalued because of that. Probably as a result of, okay, this is going to be my first full-time job as a faculty member. This is going to be a good opportunity. Sure, it's starting low, but as they said with the handshake, I'm going to have my salary go up quickly within a year. So I didn't necessarily feel undervalued by that. But when I went out and got my other offer letters while I was at Irvine, because they asked me to go out and get offers, when I saw that they were willing to pay me much more and they valued me more, it did definitely leave a a bad taste in my mouth with Irvine, because if these other schools seem to value me and my contributions, why is Irvine not? And then bringing the offer back, and them saying that they would match it was kind of like, well, okay, they're going to match it. They said they did what they said they would do, is they would match an offer. But at the end of the day, I still not feel valued because of that, because it took an outside offer to for me to come back and for them to value me. But unfortunately, this is the way a lot of things do work in academia, is that your value kind of depends on how others value you. So if I believe that one of my students is really awesome, if I'm the only one that believes that, other people in my department don't believe that, it doesn't necessarily translate to everyone kind of knowing it. So our value kind of depends on, unfortunately, what other people think about us collectively in academia. That's just the way it is, or at least the way that I've learned it is. So I don't know if that answers Vincent's question.
Yes, he says, thank you so much. And then
Okay.
we have another question from Nelson.
Sure.
And he asks, does NIH say how much of the grant support is paid as a salary to the PI? Do these differ by PI work location / setting, US versus resource limited settings?
So I would say that part is always negotiable. So I've seen grants that have someone on the grant of at 2% effort. And I've also seen grants that have someone on the grant for 40% effort. So it really depends what reviewers will look at. So I mentioned someone has 2% effort. So reviewers will look at that and they'll be like, what is someone really going to do with 2% effort? So they might critique that part if the person is not known to them. If the person is known to them and they're a wonderful scientist, they might keep their comment to themselves. Because part of this game of grant writing for NIH is actually being known and having the name. But in terms of how much salary that you get and pay yourself, so this really varies. So I don't have an answer as to what should be the perfect amount to pay for yourself, but a lot of times what I'll see in terms of amounts is 25 to 30%, and that's not uncommon at all. Does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Is there a consensus if people would like to see a sample offer letter?
I would love to see one.
Okay. Pal, did I send one last year? If not, I could send a new one.
I think I do have one from last year.
Okay.
I can send that to the participants from today.
Okay. Any other candid questions? Questions about anything?
Hi, Brandon. I have a quick one. Does the person say who brings in 10 grants versus the one who brings in 2 grants sort of fall in the same salary category? I have a scenario where at one of the institutions I know, they say they have different salary categories for junior, mid-level, and senior level researchers. And just wondering how one would negotiate that space if they say bring in an additional grant.
So you're saying that if the institution says bring in an additional grant and we'll give you more pay.
Yeah, this institution seems to have say they kind of determine there's a cap limit depending on your experience and your publications and the grants you've won before and the years you've been basically researching. So it may not necessarily be the number of grants. If you're a junior or mid-level researcher, it would be hard sort of to break into the senior salary cap limit.
Yes, I mean, if you're talking about just the institutions very, I think they vary very, very widely. So, for example, when I mentioned that, my old advisor at Hopkins, he had to bring in 90% of his salary in grants, and he was a very senior researcher who's now retired. That's how senior he was. But the number of grants for him did not matter. The only thing that mattered was the amount. So if he got one single grant that supported him for 90% time, that's fine. But it's kind of hard to find those kinds of grants in academia if we're also doing the teaching and service components, because that's a lot of percent effort, 90%. So that person would also have to be like an adjunct or in residence professor to have enough freedom of no teaching to be able to really manage a grant at 90% of their time. So I actually don't think that there's a huge difference between a person that brings in 10 grants versus a person that brings in 2 grants, but the bigger difference is the total amount in those grants. So, for example, if I'm a person who's bringing in 10 grants, but they make up only 50% of my salary, and you are a person that brings in 2 grants and they make up 70% of your salary, your value would be higher just because you're bringing in more income.
Oh, okay.
Does that answer
That makes
your
sense.
question?
Yeah. Yes, it does.
Oh, okay. Any more questions or comments?
If we don't have any more questions, Dr. Brown, thank you so much for your presentation today. It was really helpful, and I'm sure all the other fellows agree as well.
Okay. Thanks, Paul.
Of course.
Okay.
Alrighty. Yeah, if anyone has any more questions, you could feel free to email me, and then I think shortly you'll be getting a sample offer letter. So if you have any more questions, feel free to reach out.
Thank you for the talk.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.